the CyberHub bunker and studio, you're tuning in to the CyberHub podcast. And now for your host and CISO, James Azar.
Hey, everyone. Good morning. James Azar here. It's Tuesday, March 23rd, 2021. Welcome to this morning's Practitioner Brief. I hope you had a good kickoff to your Monday. I know I did, but we're going to get to that in just a few moments, although yesterday's news weren't as good as I would like them to be, and I'll share about that here in just a few moments. We're going to talk a little bit about Adobe today. We're going to talk about the Shell data breach as well. Facebook and privacy, a really massive news yesterday that's going to have far-reaching impact on Facebook that hasn't been picked up, which is fascinating. Some good guys prevail news as well today, and a really cool interview that I saw with the people who ran the Soto Nokibi ransomware, and we'll talk a little bit about that because we were talking about last week on the show. We were talking a little bit about deterrence, and this interview just kind of confirmed some of the stuff I've said. If you are tuning in, we are live on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Thank you so much for tuning in live. You can comment. We'll bring up your comments and answer your questions as we go along today's show. For those that are watching us after the fact or listening after the fact, thank you so much. Make sure to comment and subscribe. Please, if you're listening on a favorite podcast listening platform, please subscribe and give us a 5-star rating. If you're watching us on YouTube, please subscribe. Turn on the notification bell to be alerted every time we post new videos and new content for your viewing pleasure. Today's show is supported by our friends over at KnowBe4. Thank you so much for their support, and you can see more about our supporters and sponsors in the show notes. And now for our ceremonial cup of coffee. My usual double espresso, which is really, really warm because I just pulled it off literally like a few minutes ago. Espressos like stay warm stay hot because they come in at a very, very hot temperature. So get for about 12-15 minutes. Typically when I finish this and like I chug the rest of it, it's like, I don't want to say lukewarm, but it's warm. All right. Cheers for coffee. So let's get right into today's cybersecurity headlines and what we've got looking, what we have to look forward to today. One, Adobe fixes a critical flaw in their ColdFusion, and this is an out-of-band emergency update. Although it has not been seen being taken advantage in the wild or being exploited, you can imagine that now that this has been that they've notified everyone to do this, you're going to see people scanning for it. So the ColdFusion platform, which is used for application building for Adobe, is significant because it's another software supply chain vulnerability. And it's critical that these ColdFusion systems get updated almost immediately. Like I said, no exploits that are available now, but Adobe have prioritized these on their website. You can see the notes and the links at our show notes at cyberhubpodcast.com. A few very important things here. Priority 2, meaning it's resolved the vulnerability in the product that has historically been at an elevated risk. ColdFusion is a very elevated risk, folks, and something that really does require our immediate attentions. There's no need to even risk this. Just get this updated, do a stand-up call, get everyone updated on this, and move on and kind of check this off your checklist for the day, or run auto updates immediately today before people get started working. And that's why we do this so early. So we move on to our next story, where energy giant Shell is now another victim of the Accellion hack. Energy giant Shell did disclose the data breach after attackers compromised a secure file sharing system powered by Accellion file transfer appliance. Shell, which is the 5th largest company in the works based on its 2020 revenue, according to the Fortune 500 rankings, Shell disclosed the attack in a public statement published on the company's website last week and said that the incident only affected the Accellion FTE appliance used to transfer large data files securely. It appears to have impacted internal files and employee information. Shell is in contact with the impacted individuals and stakeholders, and they're working with them to address any potential risks. According to multiple organizations, the Clop ransomware gang and Fin11 are behind a series of Accellion hacks. The Clop ransomware gang has also been using the Accellion FTA zero-day vulnerability to compromise and steal data from multiple companies. Accellion said the 300 customers used the 20-year-old legacy FTA software, with less than 100 of them being breached by the Clop ransomware gang and Fin11. Less than 25 victims appear to have suffered significant data theft, according to Accellion. This stuff has been reported. Cybersecurity firm Qualys, Kroger, the Reserve Bank of New Zealand, the ASIC, Singtel, Kaimar, and the Office of the Washington State Auditor, among many, have all been victims of this specific attack on this specific appliance. So there's not a really risk, impact, and mitigation here, just the fact that these legacy systems that we use that we find sometimes inconvenient to replace, or we can't win the business over with. I think these stories right now, this isn't the FUD method, but it's rather, let's make a business case to why we need to go get more money from the business in order to upgrade and get off these legacy systems that we're using and upgrading it, simply because the FTA software that Accellion was using was 20 years old. 80% of my staff hasn't been in cybersecurity for 20 years. 80%. And we're using systems that are like that old. So maybe it's time that we have those honest conversations as well. Here's a very interesting story. One that I haven't seen a lot of people talk about, but I feel like, man, this has wide-reaching implications. So Facebook fails in a bid to derail a $15 billion privacy lawsuit. The U.S. Supreme Court yesterday declined to consider an appeal by Facebook that would have derailed a $15 billion lawsuit over whether it legally tracked users about a decade ago. The nation's top court issued the order denying a request by the leading social network to review a California federal court's decision to allow the litigation accusing Facebook of violating wiretap laws. Facebook has not responded to this. It had argued in the court filing that it was a legitimate party for exchanges involving digital content received from software tools such as like or share buttons plugged into other websites. So the lawsuit itself is very interesting. So there's a $15 billion lawsuit against Facebook for violating wiretap laws. Essentially what it says is that because the Facebook widget was being installed on other websites with like and share buttons, that Facebook was illegally eavesdropping to all the traffic there and therefore violated millions of people's privacy. This is going to be a very, very interesting case. This might be the first precedent for privacy violation of this size. This just might be the thing, folks. Keep your eye out on this. I would bring this to the attention of your DPOs, your general counsel in the business. I'd be talking about this a little bit from a privacy perspective, especially if you're in the SaaS space, especially if you're doing cross-website logins, talking to marketing about this. I think this is very, very significant. Now that the Supreme Court won't hear the lawsuit will be allowed to proceed in federal court, and you're bound to see this case get settled possibly before it reaches court. But a $15 billion lawsuit, folks, $15 billion, that's a lot of money right there, even for Facebook. Good news prevail, so a little bit. Sergei Medvedev, 33, of Russia, and Marco Leopard, 31, of North Macedonia, were both sentenced to 10 and 5 years respectively, according to the DOJ, for a criminal conspiracy in federal court in Nevada. Medvedev, who was arrested in Thailand in 2018, co-founded the Infraud organization, a marketplace for counterfeit documents, stolen bank accounts, and credit account information and stolen PII, according to authorities, under the slogan "In Fraud We Trust." The network, which had over 10,000 members at its peak, was one of the top places to buy stolen information, and led to losses of more than $568 million. Both pled guilty in federal court and received their sentence, 10 and 5 years respectively, which kind of lets you know, does the crime fit the punishment? Does the punishment fit the crime? A very debatable thing. Does this create enough deterrence? So if you empowered something that's worth $568 million that the government can't account for, which means they've probably made a pretty penny off of this. Interesting. Which brings me to a great story published today on Data Breach Today. And it's talking about the Charm Offensive, a tell-all interview of Revel, Mount Locker, and Logbit operators of how they discuss their strategies and target selection for ransomware. Very interesting stuff. So one, they wanted large victims. Two, they knew that public naming and shaming works. Three, they knew that cyber insurance pays. And if you take a look here, there's actual tests, and they don't like to focus on quantity, and they don't go after everything. Laws in the US that force victims to publicly disclose breaches. They definitely don't disclose everything, but in reality, the ransom pays out is a bit more difficult in the US recently. Those that have insurance pay up quickly, but I hear that there will be a law soon. So what about Europe? Europe pays. They're scared of GDPR. That just kind of lets you know how sometimes our own laws are utilized by our adversaries against us. Ransomware as a service affiliates come and go. The hospitals are easy money. This is a very, very disturbing statement. Geographical target locations. No love for most negotiators, a reliable payday, according to them. The crime is stable and a mirror to our neglect, according to the folks over there. Very, very interesting article on Data Breach Today. Suggest that people go and give it a look and read it. Some really eye-opening things on how they view this, and it brings up the conversation around deterrence. It brings up the conversation around ransomware. Should you or should you not pay? What should be your modus operandi when it comes to this? What should be your organizational strategy, and how your incident response plan should look like in the event of a ransomware attack on your own organization. Folks, that's it for our practitioner brief today. We'll be back tomorrow with a lot more. Thanks so much for listening. Make sure to subscribe, share, and follow us on all your favorite social media platforms. Until then, folks, stay safe and stay cyber safe.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.